Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Pune International Centre for this special session in conversation with Harsh Vardhan Shringla. I am Rajlakshmi Deshmukh, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all, and I would be your MC for today. We are delighted to have among us such esteemed audience, dignitaries, professionals, academicians, and students. Before we begin, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our speaker, Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla, and it's truly an honor for me to introduce him today. Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla has been a member of Parliament Rajya Sabha since July 2025. A distinguished diplomat, he previously served as India's Foreign Secretary until April 2022, and later as the Chief Coordinator of India's G20 presidency until December 2023. Over his extensive diplomatic career, he has held key ambassadorial assignments in United States, Bangladesh, and Thailand. As Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Shringla guided India's diplomacy through some of the most challenging global developments, including the India-China border tensions, the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He also played a central role in coordinating large-scale humanitarian and evacuation operations, such as Operation Vande Bharat and Operation Ganga. As Chief Coordinator for India's G20 presidency, he oversaw more than 220 meetings across 60 cities, culminating in a landmark Leaders Summit, and spearheaded the innovative Jan Bhagidari initiative that turned the G20 into a people's movement. Earlier, as ambassador to the United States, he helped revive the Quad and advance the Indo-Pacific framework and strengthen India's defense and strategic cooperation, and was also closely associated with the memorable Howdy Modi and Namaste Trump events. In Bangladesh, he was instrumental in concluding the land and maritime boundary agreements. Later, beyond diplomacy, he also continues to work for community through the Darjeeling Welfare Society, supporting education, women's empowerment, and environmental conservation in North Bengal. Ambassador Shringla will be in conversation with Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, convener of Asia Economic Dialogue, former High Commissioner to Pakistan, and Ambassador to Bhutan and China. Along with it, we would also be joined by Dr. Koena Lahiri, Policy Research Associate at Center for Geopolitics and Geoeconomics, Pune International Centre. I request all our speakers and the dignitaries to please come on the stage. Thank you.
A very good evening to all of you. Thank you for being with us this evening. Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla, a warm welcome to the Pune International Centre. Let's dive straight into our event today, and what we'll be doing is asking a few questions on foreign policy, on international affairs, also on some of his parliamentary work, but we'll also leave a lot of time for the audience to ask questions, so do feel free to raise questions when it is time to do so. So Harsh, if I can dive straight into foreign policy and ask you that your first major speech in the Rajya Sabha was when the debate on Operation Sindoor was taking place. Also, when you were Foreign Secretary, you handled the East Ladakh imbroglio, the East Ladakh aggression of China. So what is the challenge that China and Pakistan together, that nexus, poses to India, and how do we meet those challenges?
So thank you very much. I want to thank Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, Koena, for moderating this event, and thank you, Gautam, for inviting me to the Pune International Centre. I'm very happy to see some long-standing friends. I won't say old friends, but long-standing friends from school who are here, but also more recent friends who are in the audience, and I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, you're right that my maiden speech, as they call it in Parliament, was on Op Sindoor. And I think it was a good way for me to start because I had the experience not only of speaking extensively on the issue to the media, but also was part of the parliamentary delegation that visited the Middle East on this issue. And it gave me a very clear perspective on how we really should be going about dealing with our adversarial situation. There's always been talk of a two-front war. My own sense is the nature of warfare has also changed. I mean, as we've seen in the conflict, recent conflict with Pakistan, Op Sindoor, there's no direct, confrontation or direct contact between forces as we traditionally know it. This has really been a war of drones, missiles, and possibly the use of cyber, warfare in this exercise. And I think that nature of warfare will only increase in time to come. So we have to be prepared for a sort of scenario where, things would be remote and a lot of, I would say, aggression would be really through means that are technological, and those who are best prepared for that situation will be, I think, better off. But on your question, obviously we have an adversarial neighborhood. They say that you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your neighbors, and obviously we are in a tough neighborhood. Pakistan has enormous problems of its own, which as High Commissioner of Pakistan, you would know that politically, it's practically the army that runs the place. The Chief of Army Staff is someone who comes with an ideological, I would say, backdrop that is troublesome. You have a situation where the economy is plummeting, and they're beset with not only internal insurgencies, but now, of course, having to deal with Afghanistan as well. And a diversion from some of these distractions is always useful for Pakistan. We've also made our position clear in terms of a deterrence, that there will be a new normal, that we will not tolerate in future any efforts at cross-border terrorism that will not be responded to, that we cannot mix trade with terror or blood with water, as they say. And in all of these, I think there is a certain message of deterrence that is important. With China, of course, I think it's important for us to navigate that space to ensure that some of the differences that we have in areas like trade and the border are managed in a manner that does not lead to confrontation. But we do have severe issues. I mean, $113 billion of bilateral trade, out of which $100 billion are what we import from China. So there is, a situation in terms of trade that is unsustainable. But at the same time, we have to ensure that there is, that model that we were able to achieve in Western Ladakh is replicated along the line of actual control, so that we minimize the chances of friction, and that we basically need to use diplomacy to the extent that we can. Obviously, nobody wants to be in a situation where you want to get into conflict. You want to make sure that you protect your interests, you focus on what is important, which is our goal of becoming a developed country in the next 20, 25 years, and you try and minimize the possibilities of a distraction, which is basically conflict with any of your neighbors. That, I think, will be our endeavor, and we will have to see how we can manage these relationships to the extent that we can. One by, as I said, deterrence, and the other by navigating that space with a certain amount of skill and adroitness.
So, staying on the concept of deterrence, in response to Operation Sindoor, we saw Pakistan use Chinese weaponry in its response to India. So, do you think there needs to be a shift in India's dynamic of deterrence? And how do you see the Pakistan-China relationship evolving? CPEC has expanded into Afghanistan. China has extended a $2 billion loan rollover to Pakistan. In all these contexts, how do you see the evolution of the China-Pakistan relationship?
No, you're right, Koena, that, essentially the difference in this conflict with Pakistan and previous conflicts also was that in the past, we used Soviet or Russian platforms and Pakistan used Western platforms. This time, we have largely used Western platforms while Pakistan has used Chinese platforms. So I think most of the equipment used by China in the current or in the previous sort of conflict has been Chinese weaponry, but also, as you've seen in public pronouncements by our armed forces representatives saying that it is not just weaponry, but China provided, intelligence. China provided satellite and other information, and that I think was a very vital factor. So.
And if I may interrupt, like China helped Pakistan a lot post the response also, like in international organizations, protecting Pakistan against any sort of adverse international response. So in that context also, how do you see that relationship evolving?
So I think basically what I'm trying to say is that this is what they call an all-weather friendship. Clearly, Pakistan and China, or rather Pakistan is a proxy of China. China will always use Pakistan to further its interests against us. It may not be a direct issue of confrontation. It would be an issue of really ensuring that some brakes are put on our rapid development, our progress, our ability to reach that space where we can actually pose a challenge and become a part of a multipolar Asia. And I think that is the context in which we have to see it. China will not directly use its leverage or rather directly address concerns vis-a-vis us, but it will use others. And Pakistan, I think, is a primary proxy. But one thing we have to keep in mind is that today the situation has become a little muddied because the United States is also, I think, very much a part of that great game that's taking place. And one thing, I mean, this may be part of your question later, but my own sense is in our own neighborhood, earlier we were the preponderant, let's say, a larger power. But today, I think that great power rivalry has come into our immediate neighborhood. We are able to see it in many instances in our neighboring countries. And Pakistan is also, I would say, caught in the middle of a sort of involvement of the United States and China. The basic issue is that is there going to be some understanding between these two great powers when it comes to Pakistan and dealing with us? This is, I think, where we have to keep a close lookout and see where our interests should be protected. Because if there is some sort of understanding in using Pakistan towards a certain end, it may not be adversarial vis-a-vis us, but both having a certain understanding on Pakistan, I think this is something that will be new as far as we are concerned.
Since you mentioned the US angle, post-Op Sindoor, the person who seems to have gained the most in Pakistan is the Chief of Army Staff, General Asim Munir, now Field Marshal Asim Munir. But what is even more surprising is that the relationship, he has managed to change the dynamics of the relationship between Pakistan and the United States also. So having been a former ambassador to the US, having studied President Trump and his thinking, can you share with us how all this has played out and how come as a result of Op Sindoor or in the aftermath of Op Sindoor that the Pakistan and US relationship has become so warm?
Well, if there's any beneficiary from this recent conflict, it's been Asim Munir, because not only has he managed to consolidate a sort of political support behind him, he has also turned out to be, in many senses, openly the de facto power in Pakistan. He has upgraded himself to the level of a field marshal. And even in dealing with foreign countries, I think he seems to take the primary space. It's not Shehbaz Sharif, it is Asim Munir. So when Trump talks about Pakistan, the first person who comes to his mind is basically Asim Munir, not Shehbaz Sharif. But yes, they have played their cards well, I think. They have clearly understood that Trump 2.0 is not the same as 1.0, that the approach on a global basis is different. The objectives of the MAGA ideology is different, and that you can garner influence not necessarily by what you bring at the level of a country, but what you bring also at an interpersonal level. And I think here they have done very well. They have been able to find intermediaries that have been able to reach out to the White House. They have been able to establish direct contacts with President Trump. That's not to say that we don't have that. We have all seen the success of Howdy Modi and Namaste Trump, the strong chemistry and bonds between Trump and Prime Minister Modi. But at the same time, I think India as a democratic country with checks and balances, audited accounts, very active, opposition, the judicial system, there are certain limits to what we can do. We cannot change our rules overnight like Pakistan has done. Crypto was banned in Pakistan, but overnight it was made legal. You establish a national crypto council. You have a chair of a crypto council. You take a decision to provide a sovereign guarantee behind a crypto fund, all done within a matter of few days. Obviously, there is a difference between what we can do and what Pakistan can do on this front. We are in for the long haul. We do things on a steady basis, which means that we consolidate at the level of two sovereign nations. What can we do with you in terms of trade, defense, technology, people-to-people ties, the entire gamut of activities. Here, Pakistan is focusing on a very, very narrow opening that will give them temporary gains. But I doubt this is a long-term strategy that will I would say, pay fruit as far as they're concerned. We have to continue to do what we've always been doing, which is basically, move towards a closer alignment in whichever way possible with the United States, but at the same time ensure that our other friends and partners across the globe, someone called it multiple smart alliances. And I think this is what we need to do. We need to work on a multiple, I would say, partnerships that will deliver for us.
So there's no way we can nominate President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, especially not on mediating between India and Pakistan.
So obviously that boat has sailed. And I think, if there is something that seems to be very close to President Trump's heart, it is the Nobel Peace Prize. There are many theories as to why he is so keen on a Nobel Prize. But, as far as we are concerned, we have always held that there can be no third-party involvement when it comes to issues between India and Pakistan. That is there in the Simla Agreement. That is there, as a bilateral understanding and treaty between our two countries. And we have always followed that principle, even if Pakistan has not. We have stuck to that principle that we are capable of dealing with our issues. We don't need third-party involvement. We don't need mediation. And that whatever has to be done will be done between our two countries. Obviously, we have our own, I would say, way of doing things. We have, I think, played our cards very well with regard to abrogation of Article 370, ensuring that Kashmir is mainstreamed into our political, economic, and social systems. That by and large there is peace in Jammu and Kashmir, and that any disruptions are those which are caused by cross-border terrorism, and even there we want to minimize that through deterrence. But I think beyond that, when it comes to any involvement of other countries, we have to put a line to it. And this is something that is consensual in our political system. And we cannot, take any chance of deviating from that established principle, which is very important in the way that we conduct our own foreign policy, especially vis-a-vis Pakistan.
So how's the regional balancing working out for India with Bangladesh-Pakistan rapprochement happening and the continued Pakistan-China relations? So how do you see India balancing in the future in the region?
So, the world has become a very uncertain place because if all the assumptions that you took for granted have changed. We have to understand there are no fixed rules, there are no predictable alliances. You will essentially have constant disruptions and you will have a situation of shifting geopolitical circumstances. And that is what we are faced with today. And that is reflected in our own neighborhood. And as I said, this is also the product of a strategic rivalry playing out in our own neighborhood. I think what is important is that we have to be completely engaged. In our own neighborhood first should continue to have primacy. We must engage our neighbors in a way that they find it attractive to be closely tied in with India. Sri Lanka and Maldives are good examples of how countries that might have been inimical to us are today well disposed. Afghanistan is another neighbor with whom we have actually built strategic ties, even though those are constrained by their own system that does not provide for the sort of freedoms that we have. At the same time, I think we have challenges in Bangladesh, possibly even in Nepal. But, Nepal also, I think basically what you are seeing is an expression of fatigue or displeasure with the political system that has not delivered. 11 prime ministers in 14, or 11 governments in 14 years, and record of nepotism and corruption, which I think people have essentially rejected. And it's important for us to come out on the side of the people. And I think if you saw the Prime Minister's comments following the incidents in Nepal, we have been sympathetic to the fact that we will go by the wishes of the people of Nepal. And so it's important for us to take the right approach in each of our neighbors. There's no one size fits all. We have to engage our neighborhood very closely. We have to engage our extended neighborhood in West Asia and Southeast Asia. And I think we have to, as I said, have multiple smart alliances with countries across the globe, especially the global south. That is your traditional constituency. It fits in with your vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. When Prime Minister Modi speaks of human-centric globalization, working for the global common good, sharing vaccines, sharing our, IT platforms, India Stack, ensuring that our developmental experiences are also available to the global south. I think this is where we can make a difference. We can also come with new ideas. India must be a leader in issues that relate to trade, technology, artificial intelligence, climate change, any issues that involve the interest of a majority of countries in the world is where we have to take that leadership role and do what it takes. As you've seen, we will be hosting the AI Summit next year. I think this is also very important that India is taking the lead in bringing the world onto one platform on AI. How do you regulate AI? How does the world come together and govern that space that is increasingly so important, not only in our economies, but our lives? So this is something that I think we have to keep in mind, and this is the way we have to go. In other words, foreign policy is no longer about relying on what we see as traditional partners. It's really about relying on your own self, developing your own capacities and capabilities, becoming Atmanirbharta in every way possible, defense, in terms of your economy, in terms of your supply chains, making them robust and sustainable. And I think this is really the way to go, in time to come.
You spoke about the rising competition between the two major powers, which is the United States on the one hand and China on the other. And that is a feature of international politics today and likely to be a characteristic of international politics in the next few decades, maybe 2 or 3 decades. But I think India is also a very important player, because if you look at GDP in PPP terms, China is number 1 with about $40 trillion. US is number 2 with about $30 trillion. And India is around $18 trillion. The next fourth is Russia, about $7 or $8 trillion. So I think India is an important mix in this competition that is taking place amongst the two major powers, the US and China. But I think they are also looking to India to be a partner for them. This was true of the US right from the year 2000 to 2025. Unfortunately, President Trump doesn't look at it this way. He has recently spoken not only about the G2 when he met President Xi Jinping, but he is also focusing on trade surpluses and trade deficits and making that more important than this geostrategic viewpoint. So how would you react to this particular question? And you were there in the US as ambassador of India in Trump 1.0. Would you have handled Trump 2.0 differently from what we have done? What India as a country has done so far?
No, you're absolutely right, Gautam, that it's a very different scenario. Trump 1.0 is very different from what Trump 2.0 is. And I think one of the very profound differences is the power that is concentrated in President Trump. And after all, he has won not only the popular mandate, but also swept all the 9 swing states. He's got the judiciary behind him with a conservative majority, and he's got both the House and the Senate behind him. So he's in a very powerful position today, and he's able to call the shots, and there is hardly anybody in the United States or outside the United States standing up to him. Of course, what we saw in South Korea was a very clever tactic by China to be able to respond in equal measure to Trump. I mean, after all, the Chinese are now basically responding in kind to everything that Trump does. So when Trump raised tariffs, they also raised tariffs. When Trump talked about increasing tariffs to 100% because of certain steps taken by China to restrict strategic minerals and rare earths, then China put even greater restrictions. They stopped the import of soybean completely. So what did you get when you had the Trump-Xi Jinping meeting? Trump essentially agreed to reduce tariffs from 57 to 47%. Obviously, there's no 100% duty that he talked about earlier. On the other hand, the Chinese simply withdrew the restrictions they had put earlier. I mean, essentially withdrew restrictions on rare earths and minerals for a year. So it's a conditional removal of that restriction. He's also agreed to buy a certain quantity, 25,000 tons of soybeans from the United States, which they themselves had stopped because China did import soybeans in large quantity from the US. So this is a country that's learned how to stand up to the United States and stand up to Trump's, let's say, approach to things. And I think they are getting away with it because they have leverages that nobody else has. I mean, the Chinese have garnered, and you know better than any of us, garnered the entire next generation set of technologies, materials, whether it's rare earths, strategic minerals, whether it is, AI, whether it is, tools that go into the future of robotics, blockchain. Everywhere they have invested in a huge way in the future. In other words, we are not competing with you on what is there now, but we are investing one step ahead so that when you come to that stage, we are already ahead. So the world was surprised to find that China has garnered all the resources. I mean, every bit of strategic minerals. It's not that they have the strategic minerals, but they have tie-ups with countries that have the strategic minerals. They are the one country that can process these strategic minerals where others have not had the capacity. So we are all scrambling now to develop our rare earth mission. The United States is, every deal that Trump looks at has some rare earths component. So I think the Chinese, in some senses, have upped the game to the extent that, as you said, Trump refers to his meeting with Xi Jinping as a G2. I mean, who has made China equal to the United States? I mean, you always felt that the US policy was to preserve their predominance, to ensure that their hegemony was not threatened by an upcoming rival. But today, Trump is saying that, look, we are equal. It's a G2, which makes you feel that, he also wants an understanding beyond trade and beyond economics that might involve what the MAGA space calls spheres of influence. We are not going to look after the whole world. We cannot spend money on stationing troops in Korea, in Japan, in Europe, in other parts of the world. We will work with responsible partners to apportion the world in a manner where everybody handles his own side. Where does that leave countries like ours that are also important, that have played an important role in global affairs, that have the capacity, but are not at the same level as what Trump calls the G2? So my answer to that is that we should not cede that space. As far as we are concerned, we continue to work to build our capacities that make it, I would say, impossible to ignore us in the future. I mean, today we might be, in real terms, a $4 trillion economy, but, 5-10 years from now, we should be a $10, $15, $20 trillion economy. Not only that, we should also focus on building capacities, which we're already doing in things like semiconductors. We are building capacities on API, that's raw materials for our pharmaceutical industry, active pharmaceutical ingredients. We should be working on renewable energy. We are working on areas that really are the future, but where we are protecting our interests and wanting to come up in a manner that enables us to take our rightful place as one of the poles in a multipolar world. And I think given our demographic, situation where we are one of the few countries in the world that has a much larger working age population and a much smaller aging population, I think we should be able to leverage this to our advantage and reach, that potential which we have not yet done. I mean, in a sense that we still have a way to go, but we have to accelerate that, make sure that we are an 8 to 10% growth, and we reach a place where in the next 20 years, we can plateau without feeling that we have missed out on a window of opportunity. So what is important is that you need stable governance, you need able and capable leadership, you need sound policy decision-making, you need to ensure that you have a diplomacy that does not get that keeps our country moving without being distracted by conflicts and wars. We build alliances. We work with others in a constructive manner. We protect our immediate neighborhood and environment. And we emerge in our, take a rightful place in the world as a country that has the potential to challenge the so-called G2 today. That's my, vision. And I think this is where we're moving as well.
So with the rupture that Trump has brought in international relations, countries are now spending considerable amount of their resources in quoting the person that is Trump rather than quoting United States. Actually, we actually were early on in that when we designed something like Namaste Trump. And now we see South Korea gifting a replica of the crown of their emperor to President Trump. He has received private jets as gifts from other countries. How sustainable is this sort of diplomacy? Because a country like China can afford to stand up to USA. It has those leverages. But countries like India, does it have those leverages? If we pursue the path of, again quoting a personality like Trump, is that sustainable?
So, as I said, Trump today is in a position where, whether you like it or not, you have to deal with him for the next 3.5 years. And most countries have learned to deal with him in a manner that is favorable. They have seen the downside of, going into a public space and getting a dressing down like Zelensky did, or, using other tactics like praising him, nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize, giving him a crown, or gifting him a private jet. Whatever strategy is, whatever works is good. I mean, the way I see it, these countries have figured out ways to reach out to him in a manner that gets him well disposed to you or to them. For us, I think we are not in that game because we are too large a country we are doing this sort of thing. We have too much self-respect in our own civilizational ethos. The tradition we come from does not provide us that ability to, bend in front of Trump in the way many of his alliance partners, many of those that are, let's say, countries that are very reliant on the US do. We have always believed in strategic autonomy. And after all, one of the issues that have come up is relating to strategic autonomy. We have taken decisions in our best national interest. We are not going to be, a junior partner with X or Y or Z. We are not going to be an alliance partner in the manner that Japan and Australia or South Korea might be. We are not even Europe, which is completely, in a certain sense, linked to the US for their own, security umbrella and their own trade, and even their cultural ethos is somewhat linked to the Western world. For us, we have to go back on centuries of tradition and civilization that enables us to stand on our own feet without being dependent on anybody else. Which is what I feel is that, why I feel that this Atmanirbharta policy is very important. Because as we develop our capacities, I think we will become in a better and better position to deal with such situations. So you will not see us doing the sort of things that many other countries have done. What we will do is we will not be critical. We have taken a very mature policy of not responding and reacting to what Trump says. And, his statements have been very, very frequent. You could easily be baited into responding. I think we are not into that game. We will continue to deal with this relationship in a manner that is in the best interests of all concerned. In other words, we will not be aggressive or reactive. We will certainly keep that bridge open. I mean, let's be honest, we do need a trade deal. We need it as soon as possible. But we need it on terms that we can live with. We cannot accept any terms that many countries, I think, have. In fact, I'm told the Japanese Prime Minister lost his job because of the fact that his deal was so one-sided. Even Starmer in the UK had to face a lot of criticism because he gave so much away. I mean, after all, Japan is talking about, $650 billion of investment, $550 billion of purchases of American energy and other things. South Korea is talking about $350 billion. Europe is talking about $550 billion. So the point is that you can certainly cut these deals, but can you fulfill them? And also, is it something that your public will be willing to accept? I mean, we didn't buy Russian oil because we bought Russian oil because it stabilized our economy. I mean, when the price of oil doubled from its current levels immediately after the Ukraine conflict began, the only option with us was either we buy discounted Russian oil or we let our economy go into free float. In other words, our inflation would have gone into double figures. So the fact that all of us saw a stable economic environment during the times that many countries around us went bankrupt, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, is indicative of good policies. Today, Russian oil is no longer as attractive as it was a year ago because the differential between the international rate and the Russian rate is minimal. The risks have become much greater. So you have to do what is expedient and in your best national interest. You're not doing it for anybody. You're not doing it for any other reason than it is the best reason available to you. So political expediency, working in the national interest, taking decisions that are purely those that you need to take for your own people, I think is the hallmark of today's diplomacy. So when you talk about strategic autonomy, it does not mean non-alignment. I want to be very clear. This is my interpretation. Non-alignment meant that you didn't get close to either side, although we were close to the Soviets, but in principle, I think the government of the day interpreted as being non-aligned. Whereas today, strategic autonomy means that we can be close to anybody. As long as it suits your interests, you don't have to be in the middle. You can be here, you can be there, you can be wherever you want to.
Non-alignment also provided a sense of leadership for India for the global south, right? When it comes to strategic autonomy, India seems more opportunistic sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody today in the world understands that you will do what is in your best interests, but at the same time, it is important that you work with your partners in providing responsible global leadership. In other words, when we hosted our G20 summit, we invited the African Union to be a member. That was a gesture that nobody else did in the G20 before us and was greatly appreciated. When countries produce vaccines, and I think only 3 or 4 countries really produced vaccines that were credible, and none of the other countries shared the vaccines. Everybody wanted to keep the resources for themselves or sell it at an exorbitant rate. We were the only country under Vaccine Maitri that shared 155 million doses of vaccines to the global south. When it came to providing medicines and other support to countries, again during this period of pandemic, we were the first country to reach out and help countries. So our ethos of working with our partners in the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I think garners us more friendships than a policy that is hollow. You know, you talk about non-alignment, but you're actually in a certain sense aligned. So I think that policy in a certain sense has passed its time. Today, the world is a much more difficult place. I don't think any country is doing anything that is in an altruistic view of the term. Every country is operating based on its best national interests, and so are we. So we are not different from any country in the world, but we are doing it within an ethical space, because what we believe in is providing responsible global leadership, whether it is climate change, whether it is trade, whether it is technology, or whether it is in the area of dealing with emergencies that the world has seen. We are a country that's willing to help others. So I think that approach should work with our partners in the global south, and that support that we get will also leverage our position globally.
One of the major countries that we have not spoken about is Russia. You mentioned about India's oil purchases from Russia and the pressure we have had from the West, especially from President Trump and the United States. But how do you see India-Russia relations developing in the coming few years? Where do you think we are going between India and Russia?
The other day, we had the commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the India-Russia strategic partnership. And, I was asked to deliver a statement at the Vivekananda Foundation. And in that, I said that the future of the India-Russia partnership has to be in working together. In other words, joint research, co-production, co-development, not only of defense-related equipment, but also tools for the future. I mean, Russia has cutting-edge technologies in many areas that we don't always know about. Can we work with them in developing those? I think that energy partnership has had its moment, and that moment has passed, because we purchased 36% of our oil from Russia in the last few years since the beginning of the Ukraine war. Today, with sanctions on 2 of the most important Russian producers and exporters of oil, Lukoil and Rosneft, I think most of our companies will not venture in that area. And so it is safe to assume that we will be getting out of Russian oil and we'll be looking at diversifying our energy from elsewhere, namely North and South America. Guyana and Brazil are coming to the international market in a very big way. And what is the impact of not buying Russian oil for us? today, I think the impact is minimal because with the sanctions of Russian majors, international oil price increased by only $4. Whereas this year, oil prices are less by $10 as compared to last year. So there is no perceptible drop. For us, the difference might be $1 or $2 billion as at best on an annual basis for our GDP, which is not very much. Again, because international prices are stable. And why are they stable? Because there is a fair amount of overproduction. And of course, OPEC itself has a fair amount of surpluses available, which is stabilizing the market. So you see, with Russia, I think has always been an important partner in the past. We need to find new areas to work with Russia for the future. So we need to develop that partnership in a conscious way that will enable us to continue a viable and mutually beneficial relationship with that country, so that both of us, continue to work together. I mean, at some stage, if you don't have the basis, the relationship, even if you try very hard in ideological terms, that relationship will slowly, go further apart.
So bringing you back to the neighborhood, you served in Bangladesh. So how do you perceive the future trajectory of Delhi-Dhaka relations? How does it look? Will it be any different from what it is right now?
Well, those who have observed Bangladesh over a period of time say that society there is divided between two major, I would say opinion centers. The first one is closely aligned with a liberal, let's say, approach, 1971 war, liberation war, and so on and so forth. And the other side is more linked to the, Islamic parties, more, I would say, right-wing approach. And then you have, 30% on each side and 30% in the middle who are floaters. And because of this sort of broad divide, you have periods in which, it swings this way and certain periods it swings that way. And these observers will tell you that it's now swinging in a certain way which is away from what we know it, and in some senses brings us some level of discomfort. But the reality might be somewhat different because you have to think of whether what has happened is a spontaneous reaction or whether it is something that is induced, whether it is the best way to find a solution to the future. Because if the elections that are going to be held or scheduled to be held in Bangladesh are not free, fair, and inclusive, then you could have the same problem that continues to remain. I mean, after all, if you exclude the Awami League and all of those parties that are part of what they call the Mahajot, the left liberal parties, then more than 50% of the electorate has been already disenfranchised. I mean, they are not participating. And a good percentage of the population will not be voting. So you have a problem there in any case. So I think the important thing is to ensure that there is free, fair, and inclusive elections. That it is in our interest to ensure that there is a peaceful and stable Bangladesh because of the fact that we are so integrally linked to that country with over 4,000 kilometers of a joint border. And we have to, of course, do whatever we can to ensure that Bangladesh does not go back to becoming for us a sort of a thorn on our eastern front, especially for the northeast, and that we are able to somehow manage that very troublesome situation that we see the country in today.
How do you like being a member of parliament? Is it more taxing, more challenging than being a diplomat representing India?
Well, honestly speaking, the way I see it, I think as diplomats, we were involved with public service. As a representative, you also are involved in public service. So that ethos of serving the people does not change. I think all of us joined public service, gave the UPSC exam, entered government not because we wanted to, do well for ourselves financially, but because we felt that, there was satisfaction in serving the people. And any civil servant who loses sight of that is something that I think is troublesome. You have to, there are many other ways of making money. You can be an entrepreneur, you can be in business. But having said that, of course, politics is a different game. And it really involves learning certain skills and evolving in a way that is a bit different. I myself, have been working in my area, which is Darjeeling, part of West Bengal, through a foundation that I have. And we have been doing a lot of work on the ground. So even today, I continue to really focus in those areas. And I sort of, even when I do party work, I bring to bear, the resources that I have, through my foundation and through this NGO. Recently, we had some very major, let's say, weather patterns that resulted in landslides. A lot of people died in the hills, but also in the plains. And I went up and visited a lot of the areas that were actually inaccessible, which means that there are no roads. If you want to really visit hamlets and villages that have been sort of wiped out, houses wiped out, etc., you have to walk, you have to make sure that you go out of your comfort zone. And I was helped by the fact that we had equipment with us ready. So we had tarpaulins, we had blankets, we had some food stock, things like shovels, which are very important at this time. And I think we were able to reach a lot of people. And happily, even a lot of the party cadres said, please give us some of your equipment. And we were able to share those with the party so that they could also do work on the ground. So that sort of a thing is important. You have to be with the people in your area through difficult times and through good times. So I was there during the Puja, Durga Puja and Vijayadashmi. But I was also there during this very difficult period that we had. And there are many other initiatives that we're taking. And just in the next few days, a long answer to your short question. But in the next few days, we'll be organizing, that by we, I mean the Darjeeling Welfare Society, of which I'm the president, organizing an employment camp in which we have 60 of our top companies participating. So we have 10,000 jobs on offer. Everything from, people with technical skills, people for graduates, insurance, retail, banking, but also people who are high school pass or, 10th class pass who want jobs in food courts, in fast food places, hospitality, tourism sector. So those 10,000 jobs have all been listed. So for the people in that part of the country, it's an opportunity to come and access top-level jobs, in the rest of our country, but also in our own region. And so we continue to do things that are, in many senses, in the interests of people. And so politics is all about making sure that you are constantly working, to cater to the interests of people, and to make sure that it's a 24/7 exercise. I mean, in diplomacy, depending on the preoccupations, you can shut off at a certain stage. You can say, well, this morning, I'm going to just sort of go and visit some place. I'm not going to, do the meetings that I have to. But here, it's a preoccupation that's 24/7. People come to your houses. There are no timings. Nobody is invited. You're just there. And there's, of course, a constant expectation that you'll help people out. Someone has an operation. I mean, when I went to hospital, I found that there was an old lady whose chest had sort of, had been severely affected because she was buried under a lot of mud in that landslide. And she needed specialist treatment. We had to arrange for that treatment, take her down to Siliguri, make sure she gets into hospital, pay for it. So it involves a lot of public service. You have to raise the resources. You have to do whatever it takes. And it's not, I'm the Rajya Sabha. I mean, for me, I'm doing it because I want to work for the people. I mean, I could have stayed in Delhi, but I've gone back to my area because You want to give back to the place that gave you the opportunity to serve your country, to be a member of the Foreign Service, to have exposure to so many opportunities. But it's now time to pay back and to see how you can use your experience, use your, let's say, contacts to create opportunities for those that didn't have the same, let's say, luck or good fortune that I may have had.
At another sort of personal question, how do you keep yourself fit and going at our age now?
I thought the question should be, how do you keep yourself so unfit? But it's like all of us, you try to ensure that you have a workout regime. You have schedules which you don't manage to keep. There are always demands on your time that impinge on that space. But I think you have to find that space. And if you don't find that space, you've got to resist, some of the things that come your way in terms of your diet. And like all of us, I think you tend to, at some stage, avoid certain foods that you would like to have, but you could do without. And so it goes on. But I think keeping fit and keeping healthy is very, very important, because your effectiveness really lies in being able to maintain good health. And I think that's, of course, goes for all of us in whatever we do. There comes a certain age in which you have to really focus on your health in a way that is like a mission mode, as Amita would tell us, and who also practices it very diligently. But I think all of us really need to get into that, and that's a good point.
Thank you for sharing that. What you said about staying off certain foods is music to my wife's ears, because she's been trying to get me to do that, and I think after today I'm going to have to follow that regime. But let's do one thing. I think we have had a lot of very detailed discussions with Mr. Shringla. Let's open it up to the audience, and we'd be happy to take questions. Shall we take a couple of questions and you'd answer both of them? How would you like to? Let's take 2 questions at a time. There are some hands up in the front that I can see, some at the back. We'll try to take, we have left enough time for questions from everyone. इथे पुढे आणता का? We'll take questions from the front and then we go to the back.
Thank you very much, Foreign Secretary Shringla. That was really a wonderful presentation, a very nice chat, really. And Gautam and Dr. Lahiri, thank you for that. The question is, we've had. I heard you say that we can't give crowns, basically, because we are a large country. We have self-respect and all the rest of it. But I just want to test you a little bit, test this notion a little bit more, because we've really had a dream run for the last decade or so, diplomatically. We've scored so many victories internationally. And after Operation Sindhur, I was just wondering why we couldn't have been a little more pragmatic, because you don't have to sacrifice your self-respect while at the same time just giving in a little bit, because every time he said yes, we said no. We could have just kept quiet, or we could have, or we could have given him a big, huge medal saying Bharat Mitra medal or something, which we could have buried after 3 years, but we could have just played along and humored him, is what is
You're
my
talking
question.
about Trump?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that question. We'll take one more from the lady in the same row. We'll come to all of you. We'll try to get as many questions. We've got enough time. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening to the respected panelists. My question is, how is India planning to leverage the new comprehensive trade agreement with UK and the ongoing negotiations with the European Union in the current global context?
Maybe we'll take those 2 questions.
Yeah, honestly, the idea for Bharat Mitra or some award of that nature struck me as well. And I think we need to keep something like that handy in our pocket. That, here's a Bharat Gaurav or a Bharat Mitra or something. I'm not talking about, of course, the Padma level of award, but something that goes to foreign heads of state and government. And believe me, many states have such awards, that are reserved for, special foreign dignitaries. And Prime Minister Modi, incidentally, has the record of receiving the highest number of such awards from countries across the world. But of course, I mean, we are not aware of the full circumstances. I mean, I'm not in government and neither are you. We can only speculate what happened and what are the reasons that, we took a position that we did. I think, as I mentioned, for us, it's important to draw a line the moment you concede that someone can actually intervene. Because don't forget, it was not just a question of acknowledging mediation, but also taking it to the next step of trying to conclude a peace deal, which is also, a feather in your cap when you're trying to so desperately look for a Nobel Peace Prize. But that's besides the point. I think we hesitate to go down that route because we are not yet ready to talk to Pakistan that has not conceded on the essential issue of terrorism that emanates from Pakistan, terrorism that is clearly, controlled by the deep state in Pakistan, the use of terror as an instrument of policy against us. And I think unless those issues are addressed first and foremost, and that there is a certain serious guarantee that Pakistan will not indulge in cross-border terrorism in the future, that is demonstrable, not just in terms of words that, we won't agree to terrorism. I think there can be no question of sitting down and talking to them. We have gone that path many times in the past. After the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai, we provided the entire dossier. We provided every detail to Pakistan. But no action was taken. Jaish-e-Mohammed is continuing. All of these, familiar faces in the world of terrorism are there with impunity. After the Uri attack, we actually allowed a team, including some ISI members, to come down and see the spot, provide physical evidence on the spot so that, if there is any good intention. And Prime Minister Modi, don't forget, invited Nawaz Sharif for his inauguration in 2014, visited Lahore after that, and then you had the Uri attack. We made every good, let's say, gesture of inviting them, but nothing came out of it. So I think the lesson learned is that unless you are very clear that terrorism is something that does not pay, and for every act of terrorism, you will have a very, very sound response from India, a deterrent that is in place, and a policy of deterrence that's in place, as in the new normal, Pakistan will not resile from its continuous attempts to weaken India or distract India through cross-border terrorism. And so I think that is completely out of the ambit, and we don't want to go that way at all. That's my sense. But again, this is only something we can speculate on. And of course, when it comes down to the issue of the trade agreements, both with the UK and the EU. Actually, I think the trade negotiation with the US has brought home to us that we need to develop new markets as quickly as possible. The only way you can become a developed country in the next 20 years is through trade. All those countries that have seen rapid growth, accelerated growth, whether it's Singapore, whether it's China, has done it through trade. So trade is critical. So trade with the United States is important, but we must develop new markets. And those new markets can be in Africa, they can be in Southeast Asia, they can be in Central Asia, they can be in Europe, but we need to develop those. So right now we have a certain number of free trade agreements, Australia, UAE, UK. But I think the EU agreement will be important. And I'm told that at least 4 or 5 out of the 10 chapters have been concluded. 2-3 other chapters are agreed in principle. That has left a couple of chapters for us. And, the process is slow because there are 27 members in the EU and the consultation process itself takes time. But what is, I think, there are 2-3 aspects that are, I think, left for us to sort out. One is steel, the other is automobiles, and the third is what is called CBAM, which is basically, a sort of a green tax that the EU proposes to levy on countries, which can then find us on the wrong side. So these are concerns that are there on the table of the EU. As far as UK is concerned, I think it gives us tremendous opportunities to access the market in the UK. I mean, we have, I think, 90% access, and they have lower access because of the difference of the size of the market. But we have significant access for our labor-intensive goods that are actually subject to high taxes by the United States. So whether it is apparels, whether it is leather, whether it is light engineering, seafood, etc., I think those will get access to the US. For a lot of young people, I think there are opportunities in terms of not only education, but also a sort of OPT equivalent of working after studying, and some sort of internship training and work programs under the Migration Mobility Agreement that this larger agreement, the preferential trade agreement, covers with the UK. So there are a lot of opportunities there, and I hope we can make the best of it. But my own sense is that we need to move quickly to tie up as many of these agreements as possible, because in a certain sense, by dropping out of RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership that includes China and Southeast Asia, Australia, etc., we're not able to access that market with that level of, I would say, advantage that we had. We are not in part of the TPP, which is the China and other countries that are part of that ambit, a large number of countries in Latin America and so on and so forth. But I think we need to also ensure that in this game of competitive advantage through bilateral trade agreements, we are not, we have a position that is secure, and that we have markets that we can count on for our products that I think increasingly will be very important, because we should be focusing on doubling or quadrupling our exports in the near future. I mean, exports have become absolutely critical, and we need to develop new markets, but we also need to develop our capabilities and capacities that will enable us to access markets that we haven't done so far. We've been, let's face it, complacent with the fact that we have $140 billion access to the US, or say $70-80 billion for our goods. We've got access to certain markets in the Middle East, maybe Europe to a certain extent, but have we developed any other new markets? I think this is something that we have to now seriously consider.
Yeah, let's take a few more questions. There are 3 hands up in the middle there. Let's take all 3 of their questions. Oh, there's one here. Yes, please. Yes, please. If you could just introduce yourself and then ask you the question, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is General Patankar. The Gaza peace plan. After President Trump came up with this plan, we have not only welcomed it, but we have said it's a workable plan, and we've was that decision, in your view, out of conviction, or as a small gesture of softening of our attitude?
Okay, so that's the Gaza peace plan. We'll take one more question. There's the gentleman in the middle, his hand is up, and then we'll take the 2 ladies in the next row.
Arush Upasni, student at the Ferguson College, Pune. Ambassador Shringla, sir. The Indian diaspora, it is often hailed as the Indian ambassador abroad. But today, as cultural nationalism and anti-immigrant protests rise across several Western countries, including Australia, the UK, and even the US, this role is becoming increasingly complex. Sir, how can the diaspora promote India's soft power without being seen as foreign meddlers? And how can they reconcile the 2 perhaps conflicting expectations and still stay true to the values of their adopted nations, sir?
Thank you. So we'll take those two questions, the Gaza peace plan and then the diaspora, the Indian diaspora abroad.
So, General Pattankar, I think the short answer to your question is both. I think we do believe that the plan offers the only option in today's context, because many, I would say, efforts have been made, but this is the one that has enabled us at least to reach the level of a ceasefire. And of course, needless to say, I think it doesn't cost us anything to say that this is a great plan. But I mean, we may not have done it had we not been convinced of the, I would say, breakthrough that that plan represents. Look at it this way. At the end of the day, this conflict has been going on for quite some time. And there has been no breakthrough in terms of an agreement. Trump has, I think, used his leverage, not so much on Hamas, but on Netanyahu, to ensure that he agrees to this plan and there is a ceasefire in place. Now, people say that what happens to the second stage and the third stage, but at least you've got to the first stage. The second stage, of course, involves an international stabilizing force. It involves a trusteeship over Gaza. It involves then the reconstruction of Gaza, and then leading on at the end of it, possibly to a two-state solution that is the final step. And I personally feel the last stage is really to keep many of the Arab countries in play. For Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and all of them to come to Sharm el-Sheikh and endorse the plan enthusiastically as they have done, you needed to provide them with that opportunity. But we all know that, facts on the ground have made it difficult for a two-state solution, Israel and Palestine living side by side in secure and peaceful boundaries to be a reality from that point of view. But as long as I think there is some effort to, have the ceasefire, an effort to return hostages, that is also very important. That has, I think, been an outstanding issue for a long time. And ultimately to try and bring some relief to the, population in Gaza in terms of humanitarian assistance, food aid, etc. I think that itself is a solution that is very, very important. For us, I think we have to look at it in a longer sense. If we are able to address some of the immediate issues in Gaza, it opens up the possibility of a continuation of the Abraham Accord, which is in terms of the India-Middle East economic corridor. I think that is for us a huge project that will open up an avenue of trade and connectivity with the Middle East and Europe that we could not have envisaged. So the investment in the Abraham Accord, I think, would be very, very critical, where it actually includes us. It does not exclude us. So we are very integrally involved in a Middle East peace process. I think our involvement in terms of a good relationship with both Israel and the Palestinian side, as well as the rest of the Arab world, is very, very critical. And we have to be invested in that effort in whichever way we can. We have already said that we will contribute in various ways, and I think we should be engaged in that effort. As far as the Indian diaspora is concerned, I think that's a very good question, because recently there was this issue of whether the Indian community, whether the Indian community in the United States should have come out more clearly and strongly to bat for India when it came to issues relating to Trump. And I think it was in response to something that Shashi Tharoor said about the community. But having lived in the United States and worked there, on the diplomatic side of things, let me tell you that first and foremost, the Indian community in the US is one of our most successful communities. They've always been willing to come forward to help in ways that you can't always speak about. I mean, whether it is in terms of influencing congressmen and senators, whether it is giving you access to the White House, whether it is dealing with local politicians in a way that you can you can leverage that in terms of your relationship. I think we have seen very strong support from the community. But they have to be obviously there has to be some informal way to channelize that energy. And I think, if you do it overtly in this manner, you actually compromise their ability to help you. At the end of the day, they're US citizens. We should not forget that. I mean, they have taken US citizenship, they have pledged allegiance to the US flag, and then we are saying that they should come out in favor of India against their own administration and president is, I think, an unfair, assumption. And I'm not saying this vis-a-vis anything. This is my own view. I think it's important that you allow their support to be channelized in an informal manner, without in any way, as I said, compromising their own interests in their own country, and that is your best bet. So you have many leverages at your disposal in the United States. You've got, the multinationals that have invested so heavily in India. You've got the defense firms that have so much to do with India. You've got, of course, the community that is important. You've got, the tech side that is also extremely critical there. And you've got the opposition, you've got the Democrats that are happy to weigh in to your advantage. So you have several leverages. It's a question of how you exercise them and the manner in which you exercise them. I think doing it in this blunt way does not help. And of course, the Indian diaspora across the world has become very important. With 35 million people, combined wealth of 2.5 to 3 trillion, I'm told. You can imagine in terms of the size of that, if you were to put the wealth of the Indian community living abroad together, it represents a huge amount of wealth. So they have the influence, they have the capital, they have the know-how. You have to channelize that and bring it to your advantage in a way that they're comfortable with. I mean, you cannot force anybody, and at the same time, there is no emotional blackmail, I think, that should be used. It's a question of how you can best channelize it, and nobody understands it better than Prime Minister Modi, who has always made it a point to reach out to the Indian community. Whenever he travels to any country, you will find that he has an engagement with the community. It may be a limited engagement, it may be an engagement which is cultural, but he always makes it a point to reach out to the community because he knows how important Indian communities are across the globe today. Look at Guyana. Guyana is a country that is going to be producing oil, that is going to be a major exporter of oil from next year. Majority of population Guyana of Indian origin. So you don't neglect your communities, you embrace them in a positive way, but you must realize that they themselves have obligations, they themselves have interests, and they themselves have commitments that cannot and should not be compromised in this overlapping sense of loyalties that you might want to impose on them.
So let's take 2 more questions. I think there are 2 ladies here with their hands up. Let's take questions from both of them. Yes, please. Madam, please state your name and then the question.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Vaishnavi. I'm a student of Defense and Strategic Studies from SPPU, Department of Defense and Strategic Studies. Sir, as India navigates a rapidly evolving strategic environment where influence is increasingly exercised through information, perception, and cultural narratives rather than just military or economic power. So, how do you see India developing a coherent national narrative that connects its civilizational identity with its modern strategic objectives? In particular, how can our media, educational institutes, and cultural diplomacy be better aligned to project India's views and strategic intent both domestically and internationally, so that the story India tells the world is also understood and internalized within Indian society itself?
Okay, thank you. And
good evening, sir. My name is Gauri Kulkarni. I am a second year at Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts. Sir, I have 2 questions for you. So you've talked about the strategic partnership between India and Afghanistan, which is primarily represented by the Taliban. And my question was, so how does this particular alliance impact India's stance or India's view as a socio-political global superpower, not just a socio-economic, but rather a social as well as a political superpower. Given that there is discourse about Taliban being a particular entity that is against rights, basic rights and autonomies and voices of women. My second question to you is, so you've essentially talked quite positively about India and its stance geopolitically. So I'm curious to know if you also have some critique as well as some solutions for your particular critique that you would like to provide or discuss with us. Thank you.
No, I think we'll stick to the first question. The second question is so vast that we'll have to do another talk for that. So we'll keep it for another day.
Okay.
But the first question is very valid. We'll take that, young lady.
Okay, thank you.
So let's start with Vaishnavi's question. On the India story, I think the point you made is a very, very pertinent one, which is essentially that whether it's the media, whether it's our cultural side, whether it is, the government side, the message that we portray should be one that reflects our traditional ethos, our civilizational ethos, but also one that is we are able to project a certain identity on a global basis. And I think if you saw during Op Sindoor, this became very, very important because at the end of the day, I think messaging was key. How do we get our point of view across to the maximum number of people, not only within our country, but also outside, so that our perspective and the facts that we have put out are those that everybody knows, because it became a question, as you say, a perception between what we were saying and what Pakistan was saying. And in today's 24/7 news, you have to make sure that you are doing this on a virtual basis. In other words, whether it's day or night, as and when information is available, it should be out, and you should be able to project your point of view very effectively. But the larger question, of course, of how we can use our traditional ethos, in terms of putting across a sort of a wider platform or soft power, as we call it, is very important. I mean, one good example is yoga. I mean, when Prime Minister Modi addressed the UN in 2015, this was his first address to the UN. He called for the UN to declare an International Day of Yoga. And it is within 77 days of that the UN, in a unanimous resolution, apparently a record number of countries that co-sponsored that resolution, brought in yoga as, 21st June as the International Day of Yoga. And today yoga is the in thing. It's the most popular, way of life. I mean, it's not a sport. It's basically something that you live with. And it's in today's day and age, people understand that preventive actions are far more important than, therapy. In other words, therapeutic remedies. So if I can, as Gautam said, fitness is important. If I can, focus on yoga and I have both peace of mind and, physical fitness, then the world is catching on to what I think we have been doing for centuries, if not millennia. So how can we get our traditional ethos and share it with the rest of the world? When the whole world is talking about climate change, mitigation, adaptation, paying to get climate change, to address the challenges of climate change, we came up with this theory of lifestyle for environment. I mean, after all, in our country, we don't waste things. There is a circular economy. That same item that you use is continued to be used. It does not get thrown away. We don't, have a culture of, immediate use and disposal. And we don't also necessarily subscribe to this vision of higher consumption and, higher production to sustain the economy. We believe that, you should use things to the extent that you can. You understand the value of things. And this comes from an ancient ethos. We also are more, there is a link between our lifestyle and nature per se. Appreciate the fact that, nature gives you things that are remedies, whether it is Ayurveda, whether it is, yoga, whether it is, all of this are traditional forms of dealing with nature. So if the UN Secretary General says that today the world is consuming 6 times more than it can sustain, then you need to think of a lifestyle for an environment where you have 24/7 ACs. If you go to the big cities in the developed world, office buildings are left with all their lights on throughout the night because there's so much surplus energy. You come down to a more sustainable lifestyle. And so these concepts of ours, I think, are very, very important in getting the message through. And as Gautam correctly pointed out, we can talk about this and the second question that our friend asked for a long time. So I'll stop here and go on to her first question, which is on the Taliban. And I did mention that, in an earlier exchange that we had, that while we have, opened an embassy, we have developed a certain strategic partnership, but this is despite certain differences that we have in the way, we believe in our own values and principles and the way we conduct ourselves and what Afghanistan under the Taliban believe in. So, put it this way, that we are today in a situation where we have to recognize that we have a very long and traditional connect, a close connect with the Afghan people. And even in the recent past, we have invested a lot in the development of Afghanistan. We cannot allow that to go away all of a sudden because of this change in situation. We cannot allow the Afghan people to continue to have situations where access to medicines, access to basic facilities are not there. Today, we are providing them with a lot of support in those areas, which is people-to-people oriented. It is not linked to governments. Of course, there is the Mandala theory of Chanakya, which says the enemy of my enemy is my, the enemy of my friend is my, enemy of my enemy is my friend. But that is, that's real politics, that's different. We have opened an embassy, but we have not formally recognized the Taliban regime. So there are certain balances. And I think we do also believe that, until and unless certain conditions from the Taliban side are fulfilled, including, access to education for girls, more freedom, for women, etc., to work, etc., we might have issues on a certain different level. So there is a real politic and pragmatic aspect, which is linked to our people-to-people relationship with Afghanistan. On the other hand, there are some unfulfilled conditions which have also been reflected in UN Security Council resolution, I think it's 1533 or something, which talks about all of this. And incidentally, we were the ones who helped draft that resolution. And I happened to be chairing the Security Council when I was Foreign Secretary when we adopted that resolution. Continues to be a seminal resolution in the United Nations today. So there are issues, so we cannot go the whole hog. It's a conditional approach to Afghanistan that we have made so far. But let's hope it gets better.
We have really run out of time. I see that there's one hand there, and I will take that as the last question. So one question from the front here. But then we have to bring it to a close because I think he's been talking a lot and I know that he's drunk a lot of water to keep his throat.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. They say all is fair in love and war. And it's also said that the wars of this century are going to be about water. So recently, during or after Operation Sindoor, the Indus Water Treaty was abrogated by India. And I'd like to know whether we will use the time before negotiations to either withhold or find ways to divert the water to, from the 3 western rivers towards the 3 eastern rivers, over which India has all rights, and turn water into a weapon of peace by ensuring that the Punjabi and the West Punjabi and the Sindhi farmers really are dependent on us as to when we will release the water or whether we will release floods. I'm not saying this as a pump manufacturer because the water is at a level where it can flow down by gravity, but Indian civil engineering skills have improved tremendously. Water can be brought through tunnels down to the plains and tunnels and canals. And there's also a great opportunity for green energy when you bring that water down. So the costs can be recovered from that. Your thoughts?
So the first point, of course, is that there is the Indus Water Treaty that was concluded with the mediation of the World Bank has been, in some senses, skewed against our interests. 90% of water that flows through our territory goes to Pakistan. We retain only 10%. So I think a certain imbalance has to be rectified. Secondly, under the terms of the treaty, we have not been able to do even basic things like flushing out the sediment from our dams. Because that needs Pakistan to give approval under the treaty, and Pakistan has never given approval. So we have unilaterally gone and done that. And I think we need to develop irrigation facilities for farmers in Jammu and Kashmir, Rajasthan, Gujarat, etc., which they have not had access to so far. But at the same time, my sense is, water will continue to flow. You are not going to impede, bulk of the water from flowing down. You will utilize what you need. And there should be better utilization of the water. Right now, as I said, it is one way. And the agreement that was signed, I think in the 1960, was one-sided and did not serve our interests. And we are today dealing with a lot of legacy issues in diplomacy that have come from that era. Whether it is taking Kashmir to the UN Security Council, or whether it is recognizing Tibet as a part of China without anything in return, or it is agreeing to the Indus Water Treaty in a manner that is completely against the interests of the people and the farmers in Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir, Gujarat and Rajasthan. I think all of these have to be rectified. This is an opportunity to do it. But at the same time, if you saw, there are parts of Lahore where the water used to run its course, where they built entire colonies. And this time, thanks to climate change, that water really went through on the eastern river. And the entire colonies were sort of washed away. So in other words, nature has a way of sort of determining things that is not always within our control. We will definitely do what we can to better utilize the rights that we have as an upper riparian. But at the same time, I think, as you mentioned, what has happened is that there is an unpredictability that we have brought in. We can release water when we want to, and we can keep water when we want to. So this dependence, of the lower riparian on us will increase. And as you mentioned, whether we can use it more collaboratively depends on the attitude of the government of Pakistan. But certainly water is an important instrument. And we are not today, I think, using that in a punitive manner. What we are doing is rectifying the imbalance of the wrongs that have been historic in nature. That's all we are doing. And there's a lot more there, but I think we will have to discuss it offline as we were doing with some of our friends earlier today. Thank you, Sanjay.
Please join me in a round of applause to thank Ambassador Harsh Vardhan Shringla. Thank you very much for being here at the Pune International Centre. Can I hand it back to our MC, Raj Lakshmi?
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights on foreign policy, its opportunities and challenges in this rapidly evolving world. And now may I request Ambassador Bambawale to please felicitate our guest as a token of appreciation for his valuable insights and time. To conclude this engaging evening, I now invite Dr. Ravi Pandit, Treasurer, Pune International Centre, to please propose the vote of thanks.
This has indeed been a very scintillating conversation. The topic is extremely important, dear to hearts of so many here. And I think the number of people sitting here in the audience is a testimony to that. The other thing is that we have people of all ages. You must have seen the questions coming from very senior members of the International Centre as well as from students. Actually, the whole purpose of Pune International Centre is to promote a culture of deliberation and discussion on topics which are very important to all of us. So clearly we are living in extremely, in very extraordinary circumstances. I think probably in the last 70, 80 years, we have gotten used to a certain world order which is getting disrupted. And you see the impact of that, not only at a global level, the way in which we are dealing with US now, and also at a level which is much closer to our own geography. And we are on one side surrounded by neighbors who are economically and probably in some other way also almost bankrupt. And we have also a situation where we are dealing with the US, where we don't really know how the relations are going to pan out over a period of time. So in this very tangled environment, I think this conversation has been extremely good in kind of untangling it. And Mr. Shringla has really brought his years of experience as a diplomat to the fore to really understand or untangle all these issues. The important part of the conversation was how do we see the world moving forward? And you have stressed on Atmanirbharta as really the core strategy for work. Living in these turbulent times is extremely important. I personally believe that the whole MAGA movement is really is an indication of the problem of employment across the globe. And I think that problem is only going to grow more and more serious as we see more of AI coming in, more of robotics coming in, more of cross-country competition coming in. And in these very extraordinary circumstances, and the questions that a lot of all the people have here in their minds are really related to that. And Mr. Shringla, I want to thank you for bringing a lot of clarity to this whole issue. You have, of course, shown your depth of your knowledge, also your heart in kind of working for the social causes, and of course your skills of diplomacy when you deftly jumped around the problems of the questions that Gautam raised. So thank you very much. Thank you for this evening, and thank you all for being present in such large numbers. Thank you very much.